Ratatouille is among the most beloved films by critics spanning from Rotten Tomatoes to YouTube itself, which is honestly kind of ironic considering the film sort of detests the very concept of critics, but we'll get to that. I personally have enjoyed all of the works of Brad Bird with very few exceptions, and this isn't the first time I've talked about his films on this channel, and it certainly won't be the last. But as much as people love Ratatouille, it's often its more central themes that are discussed, and rarely the aspect of this film that I personally think makes it so special. So let's take a look at this film together and see just what makes Ratatouille one of the greatest meta-commentaries of all time, while also offering a little bit of my insights into the very concept of the reviewer itself. Although Brad Bird is often credited as the creator of this tale, it was actually Jan Pinkava, who you probably recognize from having made this, that thought up the idea of an animated film starring a rat chef back in 2000. Although Jan and his co-director Bob Peterson originally spearheaded the project, Pixar eventually lost faith in Jan's direction and instead hired Brad to make changes to the story, such as killing off Gusteau, giving larger roles to the film's antagonists, and making the characters much less anthropomorphic than they were in the original designs. I think that a lot of the love for this movie is directed toward its portrayal of an everyday and more relatable protagonist than most Disney films. Usually we get princesses or gods as the main characters, but it is nice to see an ordinary person as a main character to better connect with their struggles. And in large part, I think that is what is most often focused on with regards to this film, namely the class warfare aspect of the film. Since both Remy and Alfredo are downtrodden and despised by the higher echelons of society, most of the commentary I've seen on this film rotates around that fact. Both of our villains, for example, are sort of higher class, wealthy individuals, while the protagonists are the downtrodden ones. But I think that the true message of this film and what makes it so special is the fact that this movie is in some ways the greatest meta-commentary of all time. And it begins and ends with the film's main villain. No, not this guy. This guy. Anton Ego. So for those of you who need a refresher, I'll briefly remind you of the plot points of this film. Gusteau's is a famous restaurant in Paris that has recently been devastated financially and critically. Ownership of the restaurant has passed to Skinner, the former sous chef, who's tried to recover the restaurant's losses by selling frozen food. Alfredo, the son of the restaurant's former owner, now works as a janitor for the restaurant and has no culinary ability whatsoever. In a bizarrely unrelated subplot that quickly turns into the main plot, a rat named Remy meets with Alfredo and reveals that he has an incredible ability to cook fine foods. I'm not going to nitpick at that because, well, it's a cartoon, you know? In any case, to finish off the recap, things go sour when Anton Ego, the man responsible for Gusteau's critical failure, returns to judge them once again after their rise in popularity due to Remy's food damaging Anton's pride. In the end, Ego is served a simple peasant dish that reminds him of his mother, and because of that, he recants his previously harsh criticisms and gives the restaurant a positive review. And with that said, the point I wanted to illustrate can sort of come into view. So first of all, it's important to note two things about Anton. First of all, he's meant to be an embodiment of all overly harsh and nebulous critics, and so I'll use some non-culinary critics to compare him with throughout this video. And secondly, it's not a random coincidence that his name is Anton Ego, but I'll return to that. Anton Ego is the very statement this film is trying to make made flesh. He is the critic, the one who judges the work of others, and impacts their lives, while at the same time offering nothing of his own up for critique. He's harsh, he's unpleasant, and he's arrogant. Anton is essentially the culinary version of, say, Roger Ebert, the film critic who once, very reasonably and without any hyperbole, of course, as such a professional man, once said of a film he didn't like that it's sickening, utterly worthless, shameful trash. If it is not the worst film I have ever seen, that makes it all the more shameful. People with talent allowed themselves to participate in this travesty. Disgusted and unspeakably depressed, I walked out of the film after 2 hours of its 170-minute length. That was on Saturday night, as a line of hundreds of people stretched down Lincoln Avenue, waiting to pay $7.50 apiece to become eyewitness to shame. What constructive criticism. Also, I can't say that I recommend looking up the film that he reviewed, because it's not very kid-friendly by any means. But anyway, what I really want to focus on here is the essential springboard for the point I want to make, and that's his final speech at the end of the film. Once Anton is changed from the experience of trying Remy's food, he writes his review of Gusteau's that goes as follows. In many ways, the work of a critic is easy. We risk very little, yet enjoy a position over those who offer up their work and themselves to our judgment. We thrive on negative criticism, which is fun to write and to read. But the bitter truth we critics must face is that in the grand scheme of things, the average piece of junk is probably more meaningful than our criticism designating it so. But there are times when a critic truly risks something, and that is in the discovery and the defense of the new. The world is often unkind to new talent, new creations. The new needs friends. Last night I experienced something new. An extraordinary meal from a singularly unexpected source. To say that both the meal and its maker have challenged my preconceptions about fine cooking is a gross understatement. They have rocked me to my core. In the past, I have made no secret of my disdain for Chef Gusteau's famous motto, "Anyone can cook," but I realize, only now do I truly understand what he meant. Not everyone can become a great artist, but a great artist can come from anywhere. It is difficult to imagine more humble origins than those of the genius now cooking at Gusteau's, who is, in this critic's opinion, nothing less than the finest chef in France. I will be returning to Gusteau soon, hungry for more. Now, there is a lot that I want to say about this quote, but I'll start with this. The echoes of what Anton is saying here can be felt all across this very platform. Namely that very often, if almost universally, it is the case that the critic judges others without risk. They have no project on the line, they have no message they want to convey that might carry controversy, no constraints on their budget that might lead to embarrassing results if not cleverly subverted in some way. No hard and passionate work on an art piece that may well be condemned and spell out their reputation for the rest of their artistic career. The critic is very often someone who enjoys the privilege of hiding behind a one-way mirror. Their own actions, life experience, art that they've created, and very often even their real appearance or name is not shown to the public. And yet, despite offering none of themselves up at all for criticism, they dish it out relentlessly. And so by doing that, the critic is able to control the way they're perceived in a way that the artist simply can't. Only their witty commentary is judged while the thing that they criticize is brought down. It's like an ego manufacturing machine. The audience also enjoys a similar status and position. They are made to feel like they too are part of a massive bandwagon that enjoys the privilege of looking through that same mirror and judging without the risk of judgment upon themselves. The people who actually cook the food we eat and draft the music we listen to and painstakingly craft over years of hard work the movies that we watch risk everything. And he is right that even if what they make is junk is so subjective that to someone it may well bring them some joy. Meanwhile, while making art is difficult, simply saying that it's awful is the easiest thing in the world. Oftentimes in the cases of the smallest productions that have become worldwide hate fests, like Birdemic for example, the people expressing their hatred for the film make more money saying that it's awful than the people that actually made it will ever see. And why is that? Because, like Anton says, negative criticism is very fun. It's fun to watch someone tear someone or something apart, because it makes many of us feel better about ourselves and our own station. For example, maybe I'm not popular, but at least this person is popular for a bad reason. And ultimately the fact that Anton's redemption comes from appreciating what would be considered junk made from a lowly and despised artist is in a way the film saying that sometimes it's okay to like something that isn't highbrow or high budget. He's served peasant food by a rat, supposedly terrible food made by a hated entity. Basically, in layman's terms, Anton gets the stick out of his butt by realizing that it's okay to appreciate art that isn't 5 stars. And just like not every dish has to be the Fleur burger, not every film has to be There Will Be Blood. It's okay to like schlock, in other words. But more to the point, something I think is very central to Anton's character and of the critic itself is something he says, or rather doesn't say, in his initial review of Gusteau's.
I haven't reviewed Gusteau's in years.
No, sir.
My last review condemned it to the tourist trade.
Yes, sir.
I said, Gusteau has finally found his rightful place in history, right alongside another equally famous chef, Monsieur Boyardee.
Touché.
I know that this isn't the full review, obviously, but I think it's important to note that Anton doesn't offer any advice whatsoever on how he thinks the restaurant should improve. He only insults them, but offers no constructive criticism of any kind. And I think that's an important aspect of his character, since, like I said, Anton is the harsh critic made flesh, and for an example, even in his own ballpark, because we've talked so much about movies, let's go to what's probably the most famous example of the fiery food critic out there, Gordon Ramsay. Gordon Ramsay is known for his tempered, astute, insightful criticisms like this.
Do you know something?
Yes, chef.
You're a great f***ing talker, but you're a f***ing cook. You just sunk your tea,
I did not,
madam. Fuck off!
But you notice something about Gordon? He never offers any criticism that allows the person being judged to make any further improvements to their dish, at least not in the clips that I've seen. I'm sure I'll be flooded with examples to the contrary, but that's my experience from watching the show. And because Gordon has no standard by which he judges the food other than his random whims, he can just harshly condemn and physically assault the chefs without them ever having an ability to know what it was that he wanted in the first place. And Ego is the same way. He doesn't ever express what qualities he likes in food, he just has random, nebulous, and impossible to fulfill demands.
You know what I'm craving? A little perspective. That's it? I'd like some fresh, clear, well-seasoned perspective. Can you suggest a good wine to go with that?
This was the point I wanted to make about his name earlier in the video. His name is Anton Ego, and what does Anton mean? Well, it means worthy of praise. And what does ego mean? It means I, or me. So his name literally translates to, I am worthy of praise. Well, why do I bring this up? And it's because I believe that this is very much at the nature of the average critic. That blind criticism of art, while, as Anton himself said, offering nothing of your own up for the same, is a shield of sorts to one's own ego. By essentially embodying a blank slate and directing all focus on the thing that they review, the critic is able to safeguard their own ego from being the center of critique, all the while allowing themselves to feel as though they are better and smarter than the thing they review, and by they, I mean we, reviewers and critics all. And so at last the point emerges. Now, I believe that most of social media, but especially YouTube, has become a place filled with Anton egos. People who condemn, critique, and insult anything and everything while guarding themselves behind that one-way mirror. Look how dumb that movie is. Look how terrible that food is. Look how horrible this person is. All the while, whatever they've made in the past, or whatever their character or even appearance truly is, most times is hidden away from that same attitude. Sarcasm and cynicism are praised, and what could be constructive turns into nasty, mean-spirited bullying for the purpose of ego fuel. And this is a problem that seems to have only gotten worse, at least from my perspective. The dogpiling on people for making art that they don't like is so vicious that it, at least in my view, doesn't even have the veneer of any constructive aspect to it. And this attitude only stifles what may well have become a flourishing artistic career for the targets of this criticism. When someone creates their very first film or song or anything really, you have to understand that it isn't going to be a masterpiece. But the bullying campaigns that the internet reviewers send en masse to these people may well make them never create anything truly brilliant to share with us. Just for a couple examples of why you shouldn't write an artist off just because of a misstep in their career, some of these are people that, were more wealthy and powerful than others, and some of them weren't, but the point still stands. Rebecca Black, for example, made a song when she was a teenager that admittedly was not very good, but the hatred she got from that was so universally cruel and spiteful that a lot of people just wrote her off entirely, and now that she's making great music, she still has to be bogged down forever because of one bad song that she made. Another example of this attitude is the Sonic movie. As soon as the trailer alone came out, everybody had decided that they hated the movie before they had ever even seen it, and what do you know? It was a really fun action movie. But a lot of you would never know that because you decided that it was bad because someone who hadn't even watched it yet told you that it was bad. And finally, sort of the reverse here, but Barry Sonnenfeld made Get Shorty and Men in Black, two amazing films, but because he made Wild Wild West, he's now looked at as a joke forever. The man who created one of the best action-adventure stories of all time is now despised and deprived of the ability to ever make a decent budgeted movie ever again, because of one movie that the public didn't resonate with. But the hateful commentary of film, music, and every other kind of art has only fed a much worse problem. And that's really what I want to talk about the most. At its core, what we're really doing when we mock what someone has made is sadism. It's taking pleasure at the expense of another human being's failure, costing them their self-worth and even career or dreams over media we think is mediocre. But above all, this kind of sadism poisons the entire landscape of YouTube. And where it ends is with everything being viewed through that same lens. Here's what I mean. It's gotten to a point where it's not even enough for us to mock and destroy art that people make, but now people themselves are reviewed like they're movies. Millions of people take sadistic glee as they watch drama channels give a 1 out of 5 star rating for a sentient human being. The attitude of gleefully watching a person's art or character be torn apart plants a seed of accepting the idea that it's good to feel happy when someone fails.
What is it, Ambrister?
Gusteau's.
Finally closing, is it?
No.
More financial trouble?
No.
And even if a person's entire life is destroyed, it's funny to sit down and watch some Leafy is Here clone cackle as someone's lowest moment is turned into entertainment for the masses. And if you don't believe me that this widespread attitude fosters a sadistic mindset, just listen to the way that some of the most popular reviewers talk about people that have made the various content that they review. Now, I'm not going to call anybody out here specifically because I don't want to go after any actively present YouTubers, because by doing so I would actively be contradicting the very point of this video. I know I just mentioned Leafy, but he's not technically a YouTuber, right? So kind of skirts by the rules there. But I have with my own 2 ears heard, for example, a fairly popular YouTuber in my very own sphere say in all sincerity that they didn't like a movie, and so they hoped that the creator would lose any opportunity to make future films their entire career and then starve to death. With all of that being said, I realize that I'm not innocent in this regard. I know that I've been overly harsh, and I'm sure that you see much of my own criticism present in my videos. But recently I went through sort of a life-altering experience that made me come to terms with the fact that I need to decide what sort of an imprint I want to make with my audience while I have the ability to do so. And I don't want people to think of me as a bully who rubbed people's noses in the dirt. I'd rather stick to making videos about analyzing themes and characters without involving any real-life people. Now, I should clarify, I'm mainly talking about the low-budget films that are passion projects for first-time artists and not multi-billion-dollar company-made films. What I am saying is that I think it's mean-spirited and cruel to direct hatred toward aspiring artists and slam them down before they ever get a chance to prove themselves, and then laugh at their failure that was engineered by the person laughing about it. It doesn't mean I'm not going to be snarky every now and again and biting ever so often, but it does mean I'm going to make a conscious effort not to pick on specific people in the process of making my videos, and also to try to be constructive instead of destructive. I don't want to make this channel a place that attracts and promotes the idea that it's good to gain your self-worth from putting others down, basically. Now, I'm still going to make critical videos, for example, like the worst twist villain and things like that, because it's more criticizing the writing of a character and not a specific individual. And with that said, I want to end here on a positive note. If you want to make some form of art but have been scared to sort of put yourself out there, I would encourage you to make what makes you happy. If you want to make a channel, make it. If you want to make a movie, do it. If you want to learn to draw or paint, you should feel empowered and proud to simply have the courage of putting yourself out there. Now, I mean this in all sincerity. Charlie Chaplin once said something that I think is all too relevant here, and also more true than it might sound at first. He said, "Failure is unimportant. It takes courage to make a fool of yourself." And I think it's true. If my first ever video, which was terrible, had gotten popular because of people ripping me over it, then I probably never would have gotten to the point of growing my channel into what it is now. It's okay to not knock it out of the park on your first try, and try not to be discouraged by the bullying of others into quitting. So before I go, I want to say, if any of you guys out there have art, videos, or anything you want to share but might have been too nervous to do so, I encourage you to link your stuff in the comments, or you can join my Discord server where we have self-promo and art-sharing sections to get some constructive criticism from people who will actually encourage you rather than shut you down. So thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. Sorry for my long absence, by the way. I want to explain more fully at some point what all happened, but basically I had a big medical scare and I had to go away for a while to take care of it. Thankfully it wasn't nearly as bad as I thought, and I'm okay now. Anyway, like the video if you liked it, dislike it if you didn't like it, and subscribe for more. And that's all for now.